Title: The Doomsday Prophecy. Israel is hiding. What if the conflicts raging across the Middle East aren't just about land, oil, or politics? What if they're actually the final, terrifying act of a forgotten biblical prophecy? A prophecy that some Jewish mystics and Christian scholars believe is unfolding right now, hidden in plain sight. We're told to watch the headlines and follow the political analysis. But what if the real story isn't what's being reported on the news? What if the key to our future lies buried in ancient texts, in prophecies connecting today's global powers to an endgame scenario that centers on one nation, Israel? Tonight, we're exposing a final act that links ancient secrets to modern warfare. This isn't about a conspiracy, it's about a prophecy that's supposedly hidden from a world focused on purely secular explanations. To really get what's happening, we have to travel back thousands of years. The story of Israel isn't just history, it's a drama of covenant, exile, and a promised, seemingly impossible return. In fact, the earliest extra-biblical proof of Israel's existence is an Egyptian stone tablet from around 1208 BCE, the Merneptah Stele. From its very beginning, Israel's story has been one of survival against all odds. The biblical narrative is relentless. A covenant with Abraham, slavery in Egypt, a dramatic exodus, and the founding of a kingdom in Jerusalem. But that kingdom didn't last. After King Solomon, the nation fractured. The northern kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrians. Later, the southern kingdom of Judah was crushed by Babylon around 586 BCE. Jerusalem was sacked, the temple was destroyed, and the people were scattered. It was during this dark period of exile, when the nation of Israel was for all intents and purposes dead, that the prophet Ezekiel was given a staggering vision. In chapter 37 of his book, God shows him a valley filled with dry, sun-bleached bones. The text says they represent the whole house of Israel, a people whose hope was lost. Then God asks a haunting question, "Son of man, can these bones live?" Ezekiel could only answer, "O Lord God, you know." Then, he was commanded to prophesy. As Ezekiel spoke, a rattling sound filled the valley. Bone joined to bone, sinews and flesh appeared, and skin covered them. An army of bodies stood up, but they were lifeless. There was no breath in them. For many prophecy scholars, this is the first part of the prophecy, a physical, yet spiritless, return. It's seen as the gathering of a people back into a national body, the resurrection of a nation that the world had written off. For centuries, this seemed like a distant, symbolic hope. The Jewish people were scattered across the globe, the bones remained dry. Then, in the 20th century, the rattling began. After nearly 2,000 years, something shifted. In 1897, Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist, convened the First Zionist Congress and declared his wild belief that a Jewish homeland would exist within 50 years. The world was then thrown into the chaos of two world wars. Out of the ashes of the Holocaust, the darkest moment in Jewish history, the impossible happened. In 1948, the State of Israel was born. Many Christian and Jewish scholars looked at Ezekiel's prophecy and saw a stunning fulfillment. To them, the dry bones, scattered for millennia, had come together. A national body was formed, just as the prophet described. For these interpreters, the first stage of the prophecy was complete. But remember the vision. The bodies stood up, but there was no breath in them. Many who study these texts see this as a picture of modern Israel, a physical and political restoration, but one that is largely secular. A nation brought back to life but not yet spiritually revived in the way the prophets foretold. This interpretation gained even more steam with the parable of the fig tree in the New Testament. In it, Jesus says that the generation that sees the fig tree put forth its leaves would be the generation to witness end-time events. This fig tree is often interpreted by these same groups as a symbol for Israel. The nation's founding in 1948 is seen by many as the budding of this tree, starting a prophetic clock. Just 19 years later, in the Six-Day War of 1967, Israeli soldiers took control of Jerusalem's Old City. For the first time in almost 2,000 years, the city was unified under Jewish sovereignty. This event electrified students of prophecy. They pointed to another prophet, Zechariah, who wrote 2,500 years ago, that in the last days Jerusalem would become a cup of trembling, and a burdensome stone for all peoples, a city that would become the focus of international conflict. When Zechariah wrote this, Jerusalem was just a small village. For most of history it was a backwater. Yet today, many argue that Jerusalem is exactly what the prophet described, a burdensome stone, an unsolvable problem at the heart of global conflict. This brings us to today, and what many believe is the most alarming phase of the prophecy. The ancient texts don't just stop with Israel's return, they go on to describe a final global showdown. The prophet Ezekiel in chapter 38 speaks of a great coalition of nations from the far north, joined by others including ancient Persia, modern-day Iran, who will form an alliance to invade a regathered Israel. Prophecy scholars watch today's geopolitics with a chilling sense of recognition. They point to the strengthening alliances between Russia, Iran, and other nations openly hostile to Israel. For these interpreters, these aren't just political maneuvers. They look like the assembling of the very armies described by Ezekiel. From this perspective, the conflict isn't just another regional dispute, but the prelude to a prophesied invasion. At the same time, the prophecy of Zechariah 12, that all the nations of the earth shall be gathered together against Jerusalem, is seen by some as playing out in the chambers of the United Nations and in the world's media. We see a near constant stream of international condemnation aimed at Israel, an ideological battle over its very right to exist. From a purely political view, this intense global focus on such a tiny nation can be hard to explain, but through the lens of prophecy, it starts to make a strange kind of sense. Believers in this prophetic timeline see this alignment of global powers and the world's obsession with Jerusalem as the final pieces being moved into place on a divine chessboard. They believe these events are designed to push Israel to a breaking point, to a moment of desperation where it has nowhere left to turn. So what is this prophecy that's supposedly being hidden? It's not a secret document locked away in some vault. It's a truth that proponents say is hidden in plain sight, just obscured by the noise of 24-hour news and political debate. The hidden part of the prophecy is twofold. First, it's the terrifying idea that the conflicts we're watching might be the prophesied birth pangs, leading to an unavoidable, world-altering confrontation. It's the belief that the escalating wars are not random, but part of a script that ends with God's direct intervention in history. But the second part is even more profound. It's not about doomsday, but destiny. The prophet Isaiah declared that Israel's ultimate purpose was to be a light to the nations, a vehicle for bringing divine knowledge to the world. Both Jewish and Christian traditions hold that this is Israel's true and final calling. The prophecy hidden in plain sight is that the current global crisis, the cup of trembling, is what will force the nation to finally look beyond its own military and political strength. It is in this moment of ultimate crisis, when armies are gathered and all hope seems lost, that the second part of Ezekiel's vision is prophesied to happen. God says, "I will put my spirit within you and you shall live." This is the moment of spiritual awakening. According to the prophet Zechariah, it's when the people will look upon the one they have pierced, and a spirit of grace will be poured out. This is interpreted as a national moment of recognition and spiritual rebirth, finally completing the vision that started with a valley of dry bones. The physical restoration of 1948 was only stage one. The spiritual restoration is seen as the end game. The world sees a political problem, but the prophet saw a spiritual climax. We've gone from a valley of dry bones in ancient Babylon to the heart of today's Middle East. We've seen how the unlikely rebirth of a nation in 1948 is viewed by many as the rattling of those bones. We've touched on how Jerusalem has become the burdensome stone for the nations, just as some interpreters say Zechariah predicted. And we see the storm clouds of a great coalition, which some believe was described by Ezekiel, gathering in the north. The world sees chaos. Students of prophecy see a pattern, a terrifying yet hope-filled blueprint that they believe is reaching its final stages. The hidden prophecy isn't a conspiracy, but a challenge to how we see the world. It suggests that history isn't just a random series of events, but a story written long ago that may now be reaching its epic conclusion. Are we just watching history repeat itself, another tragic cycle of human conflict? Or could we be the generation living through the final pages of a divine script, where ancient secrets and modern warfare are finally coming together? The answer might just depend on where you're willing to look. If you want to uncover more hidden truths from ancient texts, and understand how they connect to our world today, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss our next investigation.